see like such a full house. And so today is 10th of October, World Day Against the Death Penalty. And this is our launch event, TJC's launch event for World Day. My name is Kirsten. I'll be emceeing for today. And so just to give you an idea of the rundown for tonight, we are going to first have Rocky give an opening sort of address to kind of summarize what we'll be doing over the next 10 days. And then we will have victim impact statements from speakers today. So I'll explain a little bit later what victim impact statements are, but basically we want to hear from people who have really felt the effects of the death penalty. Just some housekeeping first. There will be photos and videos today from our volunteers who are kind of taking pictures of the event. So you can see these are our photographers and videographers.
If anyone doesn't want any of their photos taken, please approach me at the end of the event and I will delete the photos of you and not yourself. Okay?
So if there is anyone else taking pictures, they are not our volunteers. So if you don't want to have your photo taken, you can go up to them and say you don't want. And if you're taking photos of other people, we will trust you to seek consent from the people that you're photographing. So first I will hand over to Rocky to give the opening.
Hi everyone, I just want to start by checking, is the lighting situation acceptable? Would people like more lights or is this fine? Yes. More lights? Okay. Can we turn on one more light, please? Thank you. Okay, better? Okay, let's not do this in darkness. Alright, so a warm welcome to everyone in this room. This World Day Against the Death Penalty. I'm Rocky, I'm a member of TJC, Transformative Justice Collective. To start with, this is the 24th year that the World Day Against the Death Penalty is being celebrated around the world. This year's global theme is The Death Penalty Protects No One. In the 2 odd decades since World Day started, over 40 countries have abolished the death penalty, mostly in full and some in part. In 2022 alone, 6 countries abolished the death penalty. Malaysia ended the mandatory death penalty in 2023. Last month, the Taiwanese Constitutional Court made a ruling that could effectively end the death penalty for drugs in Taiwan. The number of countries that today still retain the death penalty is a minority of about 55 countries, and even fewer countries actively use the death penalty. I quote all these statistics to highlight one key fact. Right? While the rest of the world has been making progress away from the death penalty, Singapore has only moved towards it. The state's doubling down on the death penalty is exceptional compared to other countries around the world, and that has taken shape in quite a few different forms. First, since 2022, we have had 20 executions. Last Friday, Muhammad Aswan bin Buhari was executed. Let's not forget him, though the many others before were killed by the state in our name. The second sort of doubling down we have also seen is in the legal framework governing the death penalty and capital punishment. This has been a trend for decades in Singapore, where standards of due process and fairness have continued to shift. After Singapore abolished the jury trial in 1969 for the death penalty, 2 judges of the High Court sat together to hear capital cases. If the 2 judges failed to agree on a conviction, the person could only be convicted on a lesser charge. Right? And this lesser charge couldn't then be changed back to capital punishment on appeal. Right? And then, of course, the death penalty for drugs was introduced after that in 1975. With provisions including presumptions that shifted the burden of proof on accused persons to show that they had no knowledge or no legal possession of the drugs. In 1992, these 2 judges hearing a trial that would typically hear a capital trial was reduced to a single judge of the High Court. And this was done on the strong recommendation of the judiciary because, and I quote, too much court time had been taken up by capital cases, and the court couldn't keep up with the backlog. One of the arguments made then when making this change in law was that, well, it's fine because even if you lose a trial, and you lose at your first appeal, you could still appeal to the Privy Council, right, which is a kind of English judges that used to hear cases coming from Singapore. And of course, the second appeal to the Privy Council, which was specifically retained for capital cases, was then again removed in 1994. This year, as some of you may be aware by now, the Post-Appeal in Capital Cases Act came into force. And it's a law and legislation that further restricts the right of prisoners facing capital punishment to challenge and seek review of their sentences. And this is on the back of a series of cases and amendments to the law that restrict the right to challenge one's conviction and sentence after the appeal. In a recent legal challenge brought by death row prisoners themselves, the court found that there was no issue with a blanket ban on assigning legal assistance after the accused person's first appeal, regardless of the potential merits of the case that they might want to bring. And what I've tried to highlight is that, in fact, and what I want to say is that these changes to the legal framework that's been evolving since the 60s and 70s up to now really are predicated on a system that prioritizes high rates of criminal conviction, right, over the sanctity of life, and they're done so in the name of the public and the community. And the third way the government has doubled down on the death penalty is its increasing intolerance for any kind of critical or dissenting view on the death penalty, including and especially of voices from death row and their loved ones. And this increasing intolerance is only escalated over the last 3 years. The government has not only stepped up propaganda around the death penalty and the effectiveness of the war on drugs, it has spent taxpayers' money on surveys with opaque research methodologies just to justify the death penalty. The government has launched a charm offensive to create positive coverage around its use of the death penalty in the international media, and which I would add actually hasn't worked. Right? And while in many countries the death penalty takes place in silence, here in Singapore, it has almost become a point of pride for the government. Today, you were supposed to be able to see an exhibition that many members of TJC worked very hard to pull together. Instead, you only have a wall text explaining why we have an otherwise empty gallery. The government is so afraid of criticism and of challenge to the capital punishment regime that it has frantically issued POFMA orders against THJC and against my colleagues and against international NGOs commenting on the use of death penalty in Singapore, one after another. Mind you, shame. Mind you, these acts of oppression carry significant costs, right? They cost those who speak up against capital punishment, and they also cost us as the people collectively our access to information and our freedom of speech to speak up, to disagree, to fight back against capital punishment. It is therefore all the more important that we take World Day to deepen our commitment to the cause of abolition and to commemorate the struggle against the death penalty that has been and is taking place. And this brings me to this year's World Day series. This is the third year in which TJC has organized or is organizing events or actions commemorating World Day. In 2022, we had Free Them, Free Us, which examined the ways capital punishment affects all of us and creating space for those on death row and their loved ones to speak up or to be heard, and to explore different perspectives on the death penalty, including an interfaith dialogue that we held that year. Last year, families of death row prisoners came together to deliver a petition calling for an urgent moratorium against them or on the death penalty, signed by many in this room to the Minister of Home Affairs. To this day, the Minister has not had the courage to respond to the petition. This year's World Day theme is called Putting the Death Penalty on Trial. What is this trial? On one view, a trial is a process of seeking the truth, or if not truth, at least the probability of guilt. On another view, a trial is a political process by which the exercise of state power in arresting, imprisoning, punishing people is held to account by the legal process. In our trial this World Day, the state and its death penalty are the accused, and we, the people, are the judges. This World Day, we hold the death penalty to the dock as a call for political accountability and truth. Thus, the cruelty of the death penalty and the supposed justifications for it stand up to scrutiny. We strongly believe that they do not. In today's opening event, you will hear from former death row prisoners, you will hear from their families, you will hear from lawyers, and you will hear from people who have cared deeply about ending the death penalty. These are the testimonies that the government wishes the public not to hear. When IMDA censored the exhibition that we were meant to have, what they took issue with, first and foremost, were the letters of prisoners that we wanted to display. We had also, leading up to today's event, asked 2 persons on death row currently to write an account of their experiences to be read out at today's event. But both persons on death row were concerned about whether the letters could actually reach us, since the prisons have recently been implementing changes in the rules, preventing them from passing out notes during family visits, and also tightened scrutiny of what letters actually make it out of prison. Across the next week, we also have screenings of a film featuring a former death row prisoner and his experiences in prison. We have webinars unpacking and tearing through key tenets of the death penalty regime in Singapore. Right, one of it being the drug policy that underpins much of our death penalty regime, and also the belief that the death penalty has a deterrent effect. And we will also have a discussion comparing the death penalty in Singapore and Malaysia. I'm also glad to say, and this is not in our lineup yet, and we'll soon announce it online, that we are also putting together another panel discussion in response to the events in the past week, discussing the exceptional nature of the censorship of discourse around the death penalty. This will take place on 20th October, 1:30 to 3:30 p.m. We are still confirming the lineup for that event, so please look out online. And right after that event, we'll have our last event for this whole day series, which is our closing at 4 p.m. on the 20th. And you'll hear from advocates around the death penalty, against death penalty, from different generations. We'll be launching a resource guide packing key myths and key arguments, key responses to arguments that the government use around the death penalty. We'll be announcing the Alliance Against the Death Penalty, and we'll also discuss steps towards a moratorium. So thank you for being here today, each of you, and we look forward to your participation in all events, and more importantly, to the work of ending the death penalty. I want to end off with a kind of small reflection. I think it's mine, but it's also something that my colleagues in TJC also feel. Right? I think the journey to abolition is one that often feels long and arduous. Whether you've been committed to it for a long time or you're new to the movement. Especially in the last few years, there have been many difficult and painful moments. We have lost many people in the struggle against death penalty. And often, abolition feels like it's under pressure from every single angle. The media, the government, public discourse sometimes. But it's also testament to how far we can push the state and regime into desperation and into absurdity. As the movement for abolition continues to grow here in Singapore. And everyone's presence here today is testament to a growing movement and a growing call. And we hold firm to our collective power, and we stand strong in believing that it's our right to change the country we live in. Right? One day, the gavel will fall, and along with it, the death penalty and the other institutions that uphold it. Thank you.